Well, it's 10:32, so it's time for us to start the webinar. Welcome to all our participants to the seminar on the top 10 intellectual property tips to succeed abroad. Firstly, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Leonardo Mosca, and I work for the China IPR SME Helpdesk, which is one of the initiatives hosting the webinar today, together with the Latin America IPR SME Helpdesk and the Southeast Asia IPR SME Helpdesk. If you have any question regarding our services or the webinar itself, feel free to send me an email to the address you see on the slide. And I will also be moderating the live session today. Before we start the webinar, just a couple of information on the interaction tool that you see on the right side of your screen and that you can use to control your audio setting, as well as, most importantly, to engage and interact with the speakers. So please feel free to raise any questions you might have for our speakers, or also regarding any technical issues you're experiencing with the webinar. The question will be collected throughout the webinar and addressed by our speakers at the end of the session during the Q&A. Also, the slides presentation as well as the video recording of the webinar today will be available from tomorrow on our website. So do not worry if you miss any detail or if you want to review part of the webinar, because it will be available online from tomorrow onwards. Now, a couple of words on the help desks and our services. So the China, Latin America, and Southeast Asia IPR SME help desks are initiatives of the European Commission providing free assistance to European companies, small and medium enterprises, actually in this case, working, operating, or interested in these three markets: China, Latin America, and Southeast Asia. The most direct support we provide is through our inquiry helpline, which is an email address where you can send any question regarding the protection of your intellectual property abroad, and you will receive a reply by our IP specialist within 3 working days, free of charge and confidentially. We also organize events like today in cooperation with other EU initiatives, chambers of commerce, or as well clusters, providing training workshops, webinars to SMEs where our IP experts give advice on the best strategies to protect your intellectual property. As well, you can find fact sheets, business guides, and other content material on our website. So now it's, without further ado, it's time to introduce the speakers for today's session. We have Vasco Barros and Mariana Marquez from the 3 initiatives, partner initiatives of today's webinar, ENRICH, CUBIN, and INNOWWIDE. So good morning, Vasco and Mariana. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, we can. Hi, Leonardo. Good morning.
Good morning, Leonardo.
Good morning. A warm welcome as well to our IP experts, Patrice Vidon and César Fernandez from the China, Southeast Asia, and Latin America IPR SME Helpdesks.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Patrice Vidon.
César is also online. César, if you can hear us.
Yeah, what's going on?
Yes, great. Okay, thank you, all of you. Now we can proceed with an overview of the agenda of today. So after my introduction to the webinar, we will have an overview of the 3 EU initiatives that Vasco and Mariana will present: ENRICH in China, CUBIN, and INNOWWIDE. After that, we will have a session on IPR protection in China, Southeast Asia, and Latin America by our 2 IP specialists, and then the 10 to wrap up the 10 basic IP tips to succeed abroad. The webinar will end with a Q&A session from 11:35 to around 11:45. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to type it in the question log in the webinar interaction tool at the right-hand side of your screen. So now, Vasco and Mariana, I leave the floor to you for the presentation. I will share now my screen with you. let me know if you're able to present your slides. Just a second. Yes.
Yes, perfect. So let me start my screen. So is it visible to everyone?
Yes, yes, it is.
Okay. So first of all, good morning to everyone, and on my behalf and on behalf of Mariana, many thanks to Leonardo in particular and to the whole IPR SME Helpdesk team for the invitation. As both presenters of EU initiatives in this webinar, it is a pleasure to also always cooperate with other EU initiatives such as the IPR Helpdesk, and we're very glad to be part of the webinar. So, as Leonardo said, my name is Vasco Barros. I'm a project manager and international consultant at SPI. SPI is a private consultancy company based in Portugal, and was created in 1996. Both myself and Mariana work in the international team of SPI, which deal mainly with international funded projects. Our main client is the European Commission, and in particular the Horizon 2020 program, which we participate a lot, and we have over 35 approved Horizon 2020 projects, either as a leader, a partner, or a subcontracting organization. So we are very actively involved. And we are here to present three projects which we are involved. A couple of them we are leading, and the ones we are partners. So I would like to start off with the ENRICH initiative. This is actually already a combo of three projects in a single presentation. What I will be presenting are the ENRICH centers, the European Research and Innovation Centers and hubs in three different regions in Brazil, China, and the US. So just to give a bit of a context, this started with a call for proposals in 2016 under the code of ENNOWWIDE 06. Proposal was to initiate physical centers of excellence in three different regions, in this case China, Brazil, and the US. This started as individual proposals with different consortiums. In this case, SPI and just another organization, which was an EBN is in Brussels, are involved in the three approved projects, which have different distinct names. And all of them were approved, and SPI is a part of all of them. The idea of the Commission was to harmonize and integrate all of this together as a common brand. So all the projects that had different names all became with a single branding of having a common name as ENRICH. The only thing that changed between the different projects was the country reference. Here in this slide, you may see all the organizations that are involved in the ENRICH initiative. These include all the partners from China, Brazil, and USA. Myself, particularly, I work more with the ENRICH in China project, also because it's the one that SPI is actually coordinating. SPI has an office, a company created in China since 1999, so our relevant network of contacts in China is also of great added value for the project. And out of the three, this is the one that we are coordinating. Also, we can highlight, for example, Fraunhofer IPK from Germany, a high prestige research institute. We have other research institutes from Greece. We have also governmental agencies and institutes. We have other SMEs or incubators. So this is a very multidisciplinary team of organizations in the different consortiums, which naturally work as all together to provide the quality set of services. So the main clients of the ENRICH centers, we usually divide them between research actors, innovation actors, and science actors. and business sector, sorry. So our scope and target audience is quite broad. We support from universities and research institutes to science parks and accelerators, but also the SMEs and startups and other larger companies are also a big part of our clients database. And we help the clients in through the whole value chain and the different stages of their business. So we can provide, the Enrich centers can provide consultancy, personal consultancy and coaching to the companies. We organize dedicated trainings through workshops and webinars. We also organize our own webinars within the projects. We organize the matchmaking missions to the different countries, taking SMEs and startups to these countries to meet with their counterparts for business. And we also, of course, offer dedicated reports and feasibility studies that a couple of them are free of charge, and they are available on the individual websites, which I'll further present. So the idea of the commission was to really promote the European STI community in the different regions, promote the knowledge transfer and technology transfer into the different markets, increase this visibility, and also share their know-how, our know-how in our technology development. Of course, on the other side, there are also benefits. So the different regions also have the chance to acquire new customers, have the opportunity to show their business and their technology to the European counterparts, and the idea is to bring a win-win situation for both Europe and the three different regions. As I mentioned, since these are three different initiatives that came together as a common brand, as you can see in this slide, the three logos underneath are the initial logos individually from the three different centers, which commonly came up with a common brand. As you can see, the top three logos, and in that sense, it made perfect sense to have a common office based in Europe that could be a focal point for European customers to approach before going into any different market. So in April 2018 in Brussels, there was the official launch of the ENRICH European office. This is based in the EBN facilities. As I mentioned, another partner which is part of the three projects. This made perfect sense to have to benefit from their facilities. So we have staff full-time that can attend all the requests to accommodate all the requests from our European partners.
It's good to have
so just going a bit into detail, not very long since we have other projects to present and the time is also short. I will go very quickly over the three projects just to explain a bit the structure. So in Brazil, there is a headquarters office in Brasilia and different branches in São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro. Also within the community and the structure of the center, there are soft landing hubs where organizations in Europe can establish themselves in Brazil through their local partners. There are also some external service providers that offer additional services that the implementing partners could not fulfill could not answer the need of the client, and this is also a very important part of the centers. And of course, we have different associated organizations and ENRICH supporters that benefit from the services, but can also complement in the provision of them. Just briefly mentioning the couple of upcoming activities that ENRICH in Brazil has in place. We have here a list of confirmed webinars, so we just show the confirmed information that we have. We have other activities such as workshops and missions to the different countries being organized, but they are still under discussion also due to the coronavirus issue. This is also always being very well thought, and at the moment we have these webinars. All of this information can be found in the ENRICH in Brazil website, which you have all the details here, and of course all the social media of the center are available under this slide. I believe that you also will have the slides after this. Coming to China, as I mentioned, we have a common office in Brussels, which works as a liaison office at EBN facilities. But the ENRICH in China has its headquarters in Beijing through the partnership with the EU SME Center, another EU initiative. And it is very important to us, our partnership with that SPI already has at a personal level with the USME Center, and also the transported that into the project of ENRICH in China. In this case, we have a co-working space with the USME Center where we have posted our headquarters in Beijing. This will very soon change, since ENRICH in China will create its independent legal entity in the beginning of this year. So we will also have a different location very soon as a headquarters, and of course this information will be all available in our website. In the same time, in 2017, when we did the launch of the headquarters, we also did the launch of our first regional hub. So ENRICH in China aims to have different hubs across China. These would be physical centers that could provide most of these services, if not all of the services of ENRICH in China's scope to the client. So this will be different branches, not necessarily subsidiaries, but different branches of ENRICH in China that could support and provide different services in different regions in China. Aligned with this idea of the division of service provision across China, we also have a network of soft landing zones in China, and these are again branches of organizations that are accredited with the ENRICH brand, but in this case they only provide soft landing services. That's the only service category that they provide. In this case, these are organizations that are experienced in incubation and in co-working facilities with European organizations, and that they can provide this facility to any entity in Europe that is willing to establish their business in China and making their first contacts with the Chinese counterparts. So at the moment we have 5 soft landing zones in the indicated locations in the slide, and this is something that is through a call for applications in order if these organizations need to be either European or Chinese, which have offices in China. So that is the requirement to apply for a soft landing zone. And this information, this call for applications was open in 2019. It closed in November. We had the evaluation and we selected these 5 organizations. And in 2020, we will soon open again the call. So stay tuned for this information. Of course, the rest of the ENRICH in China community also includes the external service providers. So at the moment, the ENRICH in China partners the implementing partners are the ones providing the services. However, we already have a couple of external service providers that provide the different services through our different service categories. And the idea is to increase this list of service providers so we can reply to all the needs of our clients in a more tailored way. Also, in case you want to be a member of ENRICH in China, we have also the package of members, and this information is also available in our website. This is the list of the upcoming activities, also webinars, since we are very time limited and also a bit afraid with the current situation with coronavirus. So at the moment we have the confirmed webinars, but matchmaking tours will be organized by the end of the year. So in case you are interested, also stay tuned for that information. These are our locations, both in China and in Europe, and also our social media. You can find us at ENRICH in China, and also our email address and website is also available here. Moving on quickly to ENRICH in the USA, and sorry for being quite fast, but also the time is very short. The ENRICH in China, ENRICH in the USA center has 2 physical locations in both coasts of the US, so in Boston and San Francisco, and it also has different associate hubs across the US. This is the current list of upcoming events, so different tours and different webinars and boot camps are being organized. So in case you want more information of these events, you can access the information of INRICH in the USA, and also the social media, which is always up to date and with very useful information. Finishing off with the ENRICH centers, I would like to move to the Cuban initiative. So this is an initiative from the European Agency of SMEs. And the idea of Cuban is to promote and support the SMEs in receiving information on the culture zone and the different barriers and languages of different emerging markets. So Cuban stands for Cultural Understanding for Business Expansion and Innovation, and the platform offers great opportunities for business and innovation. So the idea of Cuban is to provide the tools in terms of information and for knowledge, and also self-assessment for the SMEs trying to understand if they are ready for the different markets. So as you can see, this is an example of the Cuban website, where you can test your knowledge, which you just acquired by reading different documents that are quite interesting, since they are divided in different levels. So in case you are very inexperienced in a certain market, we have level 1 knowledge as an initial information, which is very useful as a first-hand information. But then in case you are a bit more experienced with a certain market, we have over to level 2 and level 3, which goes more in depth and in bigger analysis on a certain market. And then you can come back to testing with different quizzes, which are in total 15 questions, and you can test your knowledge of different markets. Also, we organize webinars regularly focusing on different countries and different sectors, and also you can stay tuned on the website for more information. So this is just an example of the different quizzes that you have. Also the different in the library section, you have the different content for documents. And the webinar, we recently organized the webinar focused on Russia, but we have others on Southeast Asia as well, and China, so feel free to check out the information. Also, in our homepage, you have an interactive map which already which reflects the countries where we have information, and we have either documents, quizzes, or webinars. So feel free to check this and see, and hopefully this is suitable and relevant for your organization. Again, just to finish off and pass to Mariana, since we're already a bit time limited, this is the website, very simple, cubin.eu, and all the social networks. Also, just to quickly mention, this project is run by 2 organizations. The coordinator is Hofstede Insights from Finland, and SPI is the other implementing partner. So we are very proud to be part of this project. And without further ado, I would like to pass on to my colleague Mariana to present the very interesting project of INNOWWIDE.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Vasco, for passing on the word to me. I'm Mariana Marques. I'm also an international consultant at SPI. And as Vasco already presented the company, I will move on, as we are also a bit running short of time, to the presentation about the INNOWWIDE project. So the INNOWWIDE stands for Viability Assessment, Collaborative and Innovative Business Solutions in Worldwide Markets. This is an Horizon 2020 project that has the objective of funding 120 European innovative SMEs and startups to conduct viability assessment projects, which I will explain to you a bit further ahead what they are, in markets outside of Europe. The project started in January 2019 and will be running until June 2021. SPI is one of the project partners. We're responsible for the dissemination and communication of the project. And the coordinator is CBTI, which is a Spanish organization. The consortium includes 11 partners from 8 countries, and most of the partners are national funding agencies from different European countries, since one of the main objectives of the project is to finance European SMEs to conduct the said viability assessment projects. Here I can give a short introduction about the 4 main objectives of the project. As I already mentioned, the first one and the main one is to select these 120 SMEs to give them funding for the execution of the VAPs, the viability assessment project. Each company is funded with 60,000 euros in order to conduct these projects. After the projects are implemented, the project aims to realize an assessment, an impact assessment of the results that these VAPs had in the European SMEs and also in the third countries where the VAPs were implemented. After this impact assessment, the third objective is to deliver policy recommendations to the European Commission and other relevant bodies. And finally, the fourth objective is to conduct overall communication and dissemination so we can further promote and enhance the objectives of the project. So about the VAP call, which is the most important thing about the project, we had the project has 2 calls. The first call already happened last year. It was opened on the 1st of April and it ended on 31st of May. And now we have currently running the second call that opened in January 15 and that will finish and it will be closed at the end of this month on March 31st. This call intends to bring European innovative SMEs to the forefront of international markets by providing them funding to conduct these VAPs. The 2 calls had an overall budget of 7.2 million euros. On the first call, we had 3 million euros available to fund 50 companies, and on the second call, we will fund 70 companies since we have 4.2 million euros available to provide. As I already started explaining, this viability assessment project intends to conduct assessments to validate the viability of international innovative business solutions, giving them funding to elaborate preliminary technical, market, or legal assessments in the target countries. So this is aimed fundamentally to SMEs and startups mainly, but overall companies from EU member states or Horizon 2020 associated countries that have identified in third countries the opportunity to conduct these viability assessment projects and to bring to these third countries an innovative solution. So the overall goal of the viability assessment projects is to exchange knowledge and to enhance interaction between companies from Europe and some markets outside of Europe. The second call was launched, as I already told you, in January, and the applications are open until the end of this month. So with a month, I think the SMEs are still already within time to prepare an application and submit. Here we have the funding timeline. I didn't mention yet, so I think this is important. The results and the grant signature will be ready by the end of June 2020, and then after the selected companies sign the contracts, the project should be implemented until spring of 2021. To apply, you should go to the INNOWWIDE website. You have here the address, innowwide.eu. We have a section called VAP application and guidelines, and there's a section called apply, and you should go there and click on a link that will give you that will direct you to another platform where you should submit the application. Then you can complete your registration and follow the instructions. It's very direct and straightforward, and you can see all the sections of the I'm sorry, of the proposal that you should submit. You can go there continuously and keep improving the proposal, the application, and only submit on the 31st or more close to the date, because there is an option to save draft. So I think that's an interesting and very helpful tool of the platform. You should complete all the sections and submit by 31st of March, as I mentioned, and then the results will be announced by the end of June. One thing that I think it's important to mention is that on your application on the VAP, you should mention already a main partner, as we call it, a main subcontractor on the target country. So in the application, you are required to provide a proof of contact with this partner on the target market that is requested in the form of exchanged emails, for example. Most companies already have a country in focus and probably already have some contacts and have a partner. But in case that you still didn't find the right partner, the company that you think would be the best to include in your VAP as the main subcontractor, we have a section on our website called Partner Search Tool, where we provide information about supporting organizations that act in different regions of the world that you can contact to connect you with potentially the right partner for you in the target market. So you can go to our website and check this section, which I think can be very helpful for someone that still hasn't found the right partner on the target market. For this very short time, I think it's everything. You can go and check all information about the VAP call. We have a section of documents with the template of the application form. We have a long document with all the information and guidelines about the call, and also frequently asked questions document with the most common doubts that the companies usually have when they are getting to know the project and the process of application. So please visit our website, INNOWWIDE.eu, for all information. You can also follow us on social media. We post regularly with events such as this, where INNOWWIDE is going to be presented. And we are also totally available to answer any questions at our email, info@innowwide.eu, where we try to reply as soon as possible to your inquiries. Thank you so much for this opportunity to present our projects. I think I am speaking on behalf of me and Vasco. It was very nice to have this opportunity of being with you this morning, and I think we'll also have an opportunity for answering to your questions at the Q&A session at the end. So if you have any question, just please you can put it on the questions section, and we will be very glad to answer it by the end of the webinar at the Q&A session. So Leonardo, if you can take on the word. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you very much, Mariana and Vasco, for your presentation. I will now keep sharing my screen. Yeah, again, as Mariana said, if you have any questions, please feel free to enter it in the question log, and they will be addressed at the end of the session at the Q&A. Now we can dive into IP matters with our two experts. We have a poll question prepared, but first of all, I would like to introduce the speakers. We have Mr. Patrice Vidon from the Vidon IP Law Group. He's a patent and trademark attorney and founding and managing partner of the Vidon IP Law Group, with offices both in Europe and China. And César Fernandez, training manager and intellectual property expert at the University of Alicante and expert of the Latin America IPR SME Helpdesk. So now it's time for a brief question for you. I will launch the poll in a couple of seconds. Basically, the question we're asking is whether you have registered your IP abroad. So you will see now a pop-up window. Yes, so basically the question reads, have you registered your intellectual property abroad? The options are yes in multiple regions, and then you can further select if you only register in a specific area, China or Southeast Asia, Latin America, or if you haven't registered but plan to register soon, or if you don't plan to register at all. I will give another 30 seconds to our participants to reply, and then we can share the results, and our IP experts can start commenting on the outcome. So for now,
I think we can take this opportunity to congratulate Mariana and Vasco, because they did 45 slides in kind of 20 minutes. This is really impossible. This is really great. This shows the level of professionalism that is around here. And this is also a good chance for asking, at least Patrice, in our case in Latin America, we've seen that many of our users may answer to these questions that they've been already in the destination countries, and they know very well how to operate there. But though they don't have any idea about the content that is going to be disclosed within the next hour. And it's kind of impossible. How could you succeed in these countries without proper intellectual property protection? Many of them, after that, they say, oh, maybe I'm not doing the right way and I'm losing money, or even exposing myself to a really good infringement. And thank you very much for the information. What was your experience, Patrice?
Thank you, César. I think the best way I can address your question is just to go through my slides.
Yeah, we can start sharing the results, and then Patrice, you can start from there. So I'm closing the poll. 50% of the participants have voted. So let's see. Yes, we have 25% saying yes, they have registered their intellectual property in multiple regions, 8% in China, no one in Latin America, 33% haven't registered but plan to, and 33% haven't registered and doesn't plan to. So Patrice, if you wanna build up on the results, sure, and start with our presentation.
Yeah, sure. That shows indeed that this kind of seminar is very interesting. Here we only have a couple of minutes to go through a very vast region of the world with billions of people, and with very strong activity in IP. I'm speaking of Asia. And in fact, I would like just to share with you 5 ideas, 5 conclusions I have reached by being now for decades and working now for decades in this region of the world, in Asia. Because Asia is both a friendly and a hostile region in terms of intellectual property. It's a very friendly one because Asia has adopted and has implemented and is enforcing up-to-date IP legislation in most countries, and especially in China. So that's very friendly because we are very familiar, we can be very familiar with the notions, with the ways to protect IP in those countries. But it's also a hostile country, not hostile in terms of enemy, but hostile in terms of being different from how we do in Europe. And I want to elaborate on this kind of difficulties European SMEs will have in Asia through my 5 topics. First of all, Eastern Asia is a very competitive, extremely competitive area. Somebody who comes from Europe or even the United States has no idea how competitive it is. Second, it is an area where IP is taken very seriously. China is top country, ranking first in terms of the quantity of IP rights. And as concerns quality, it has made considerable improvements. So when you enter Eastern Asia for business, you enter an IP-oriented zone, much more than in Europe. Third, as I said already, the legislation in most countries is really up to date. thanks to WTO, because all these countries are now members of WTO, and WTO becoming a member, the requirement was to comply to international standards in terms of IP. But still, there are numerous pitfalls, and you must be very cautious country by country. 4, there is really local protectionism in all of these countries. And what was true already in the past is even more true, of course, these days, where protectionism and defense of national interests has become really very important since the United States has shown this way with the Trump administration, USA first. So everybody is now making our nation first, and China had not waited for Trump to also be very keen at defending their own interests. And last, I will also touch the issue of online infringement. That is a very practiced sport in Eastern Asia. Offered online is really something where Asia is leading the way. So next slide, I will illustrate briefly each of these 5 items. Please, organizer. Yeah, thank you. So first of all, this is an extremely competitive area. President Xi Jinping wants China to become a leader in terms of innovation and IP. And this is an outspoken aim. And in that country, in China, you have so many young, educated people. There is a general spirit that everybody wants to become rich. And that there is also now a shortage of employment for educated people. Not everybody will find a job. And everybody wants to keep becoming rich like the former generation has been able to do. And so you have a huge competition that you have no idea of. Every time there is some innovation somewhere, you will have hundreds, thousands of eyes and brains looking at it, wanting to copy it, wanting to improve it. And so you put the foot in a place where you will be scrutinized, you will be copied, you will be improved, and that's Asia, especially China. If I had to cite another country, also quite in the same spirit, is Singapore. Just an example I put on the slide. There is a new patent reform that has started last month already, or 2 months ago. We are already in March. And Singapore Patent Office has just hired no less than 100 patent examiners. 80%, so 80 of these examiners are citizens of the People's Republic, although of course Singapore is an independent country. And this shows how much Singapore pays attention to IP issues and wants to become a hub in the ASEAN countries and follow the path of China. Extreme competition is my item number 1. Item number 2 on next slide. This is the curve of patent filings in the world before the major patent offices throughout the world since 1980. So for the past 40 years. And what you can see is that blue curve that is exponential, except for the last stroke of it. And this is China. China has now an annual rate of patent filing that is reaching 1,500,000. It's huge. and it's still increasing. And even though in 2017 the slope has been decreasing, I think that the figures of 2018 show that it's going up again. Maybe this year will be some slowdown, but the general trend, you can see it, is going up and up. And China files about twice as many patent applications as the United States, and probably 10 times what is filed in the EPO. So there is an extraordinary activity of patent filing in China. I have no time to explain why, but if you just remember that Sun Tzu, the philosopher, the war strategist, the Chinese war strategist, explained what is strategy. As soon as China and Chinese companies have entered the era of international business, they immediately have applied the recipes of Sun Tzu of strategy for business. And IP is a key resource to gain a competitive advantage on business. They have understood that, and they are leaders. And of course, there are so many Chinese, 1,400,000,000. So that can explain that there is one patent per application per year and per citizen, including babies. Sorry. It's one for 1,000, because you must, I'm speaking of billion, and we are only in millions for patents. So it's one patent for 1,000. You can see they still have margins of progress, and they file much more than we file in the EPO. On the right-hand side, you have the top 3 countries of the ASEAN regions in terms of trademarks: Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia; designs: Indonesia, Thailand, Singapore, and Malaysia; and invention patents: Singapore, Thailand, and Malaysia. So you see the leaders are almost always the same, except for trademarks, where Indonesia is showing up because of its size, or for the size of the market, but otherwise, also for designs, but otherwise, Singapore, Thailand, Malaysia are really the leading countries. IP-oriented and also up-to-date legislations. No time to go through it in details, but all international conventions relative to IP have been signed by almost all countries, by China, of course, but also almost all Southeast Asian countries, except for the Madrid Protocol for international filing of trademarks, but otherwise, most of them have signed. Just to draw your attention on the left part of the slide, where you see the percentage of domestic applicants in China, in the People's Republic of China, compared to foreign applicants for invention patents, for utility models, and for design patents. And the more red you see, the more overwhelming presence of domestic rights, of IP rights, of patents, of utility models, of design patents owned by Chinese applicants compared to foreign applicants, you can see that they really control IP in their country. And if you go to China, if you want to make business there, of course, you should have a look at how and where are the IP rights, the patent rights that can be opposed to you. This is the first thing to do, we'll see in a moment. Just one additional information concerning China. If you can go back just 1 second. You have legislation which not only is up to date, but is better, is more sophisticated than what we have in Europe. For example, in China, you may file at the same time a utility model and an invention patent. And there is a way to synchronize this double joint filing. No time to elaborate on this, but if you go to that country, you need to understand this. Next slide. Local protectionism is certainly something you must keep in mind and take into account. And very briefly, everybody knows there is a USA versus China trade war these days. And what USA has been complaining about is the Chinese unfair technology transfer regime that imposes to foreign companies to set up joint ventures and to share IP with local companies, so that to help local companies to obtain and develop and understand and integrate technologies from abroad. This is what it is about. And example 1 and example 2 are extracts of this 2018 report that the USA have been using against China in this trade war. Just another example, there is this, I'd say, suggestion made to every Chinese businessman from Chinese government to apply the IDAR strategy. That means that when you are discussing, negotiating with a Chinese company, you must know that this Chinese company understands that the Chinese government expects from him, from her, that the Chinese company introduce foreign technologies into China, digest that foreign technology, absorb it, and you can see that the two steps, digest and absorb, are close to each other, but there is a difference, and then re-innovate. So every Chinese company, especially in very sensitive sectors, business sectors, is invited by the government to re-innovate, to import and re-innovate technology. And of course, there are many examples of this. The old example of the high-speed train and many current examples. You need to know that. And that's the reason why you need IP in China, because your partner will try to gain advantage on you like any other businessman will do, but even more so that their government asks them to do so. And the example number 3 is an example of a company, a Spanish company, that was trapped by this kind of spirit in China, where after exporting some drugs to China for a long time, they wanted to develop their plants to produce more and to make more money, and so they had to make a joint venture with a Chinese partner. Soon they thought that they could avoid this joint venture, and they went out of the joint venture, that they broke it up. And what happened is that for many businesses in China, you need to have a license, and this license must be renewed every year. But at the time this Spanish company had its major market in China, the annual license was not renewed. And so there was overcapacity by this Spanish company, who had no way to export anymore most of the drug they were manufacturing. And in the end, the former Chinese partner came to that Spanish company and said, I have a solution. I can give you cash. Just sell me your shares. And that's how the Chinese Pioneer Pharma Holding Limited took over the Spanish company. So that's something that can happen, a bad story that you must keep in mind. Last slide. It's about online infringement. There are, if you don't know any of the names on my left graphic, it means that you are not aware of what's going on online in China, in the largest online market in the world. If you don't know Tmall, if you don't know JD.com, if you don't know Alibaba, you are not in tune with what happens. And you need to become familiar with this. Of course, you need to monitor these sites, and you need to understand what are the procedures to fight infringements of these online sites. There are takedown procedures, The Chinese government has offered ways to do it, but you need to become familiar of this if you want to enter the Chinese market. At this time, I will stop my explanation and come back in short time after César to wrap up our recommendation to enter the Eastern Asian market.
Thank you, Patrice, for your presentation. César, if you wanna jump in with IP protection in Latin America.
Thank you so much, Patrice, and thank you so much, Leonardo, for having me. Now, this is supposed to be a very introductory training. As we have seen during the survey, most of you don't have been in the destination country, and it is presumed that you don't have much idea about IP. But this is exactly what it is for. This is also a first-line assistance initiative. And this is supposed to be just a kind of a hint of what you can find in other modules. So we're going to go through the main intellectual property rights so you can have an idea about what you can find when you go there. I'm going to you to know the main differences so you can really feel what small changes make as big differences when you go there. And then we're going to go through these 10 IP tips, which is the main core of this session. So I'm trying to be a little bit fast, but don't hesitate. Should you have any question about intellectual property that has been covered here or has been omitted, do that in the Q&A session in a few minutes. With that said, I've been introduced because this is what polite people do. You let the audience know what the name of this person is so they can identify the main way to name it, to address it. And this is what trademarks are for. Trademarks are supposed to protect the identification sign of these companies. When it comes to Latin America, you can see some of the characteristics that may differ compared to Europe. So for instance, well, first of all, I know that you may know this, but in case you don't, you must bear in mind that Latin America is not a unified region at all, at least from an administrative point of view, with several subregions like you have here in Europe, and where you can freely circulate and be protected with a single IP right. You have boundaries, you're subject to local intellectual property regulation. And this is why in intellectual property rights, you must register in each country where you aim to operate. And each country is different. This is why it is so important to know these particularities. With that said, and as a general rule, IP rights must be registered to obtain an exclusive right. Otherwise, you're lost. And you gotta do it fast because the first to file principle rules. Always, you may ask. Well, not always, because there is something peculiar about certain region of Latin America which may bring some comfort to the European enterprises that would miss the European standards. Most local systems in Latin America apply the principle of territoriality, okay, in a strict way, although there is an exception, the Andean community, which is composed by Bolivia, Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru, where the original IP substantive law contains two features of particular interest, one called the Andean deposition and the other called the Andean use. The first, the Andean deposition, gives any person having a trademark registered or filed in a single country of the Andean community the grounds to oppose to a filing in another country in the Andean community, which means that you have protection in all those countries where you didn't register based on the right you registered in one single country, which reminds us the system in the European Union. But when it comes to the rest of the Latin American countries, it isn't so. You need to go country by country. As to the Andean use, it enables the owner of a trademark used in one country of the Andean community to claim such use against any third party pursuing a cancellation action against trademark in a different country. What does it mean? That you didn't register your trademark in any different country of the Andean community. Although, when you notice that a competitor is trying to get a trademark similar to yours, you may say, hey, I got my one. It wasn't registered in your country, but it was in another one of the Andean community. So please take that into account, and you're allowed to do so. Afterwards, you have to register that, but this is another story. And when it comes to what can be protected, which is something very interesting, because in Europe, we have the so-called non-traditional trademarks, the 3D trademarks, smell and color, and there have been very spread wide in Europe. But when it comes to Latin America, they're taking the first steps, and you cannot do that in any country. If you want to know in what countries you can register, for instance, your 3D trademark, go to the Q&A session and ask. So, but bear in mind that unlike the European intellectual property offices, most of the national IP offices in Latin America still require the graphical representation of the sign to protect it as a trademark. While in Europe, recently we implemented that it can be done through perception. If you can express that in a way that can be perceived under certain conditions, then it can be registered. This is why smell and color and 3D trademarks, holograms, and something very new can be registered as trademarks. But in Latin America, let's see case by case. You also have to bear in mind the protection duration of these trademarks, because contrary to Europe, where it is 10 years, of course, in Latin America too, it is counted from the application date, no matter how much it takes it to be granted. If the office takes 3 months, 1 year, 2 years, it doesn't matter. This period, your trademark was still protected, but it would be still within this 10 years period protection. While in Latin America, many countries counted from the date of granting. So, and it's very interesting because, as you know, the proceedings vary a lot. In some countries, take it as set 3 months, 2 years. It depends. Take that into account when you're going there. As to the first obligation use paragraph that is pointing there, the general rule is similar to Europe. There's no obligation. There is an obligation of use. If after 3 or 5 years you didn't use the trademark you registered there, the so-called defensive registrations, it may be canceled. But it takes a lot of time too. It takes 2 years or more because it is about legal proceedings, and it depends on the status of the legal system there. It doesn't differ just because it is related to intellectual property. But in other countries of Latin America, for instance in Chile, you have not to use it. You can register it, have it, and not use it. It doesn't matter. You'd like to have it similar registration and you want to cancel it because they didn't use it, they're blocking it for unfair reasons, it doesn't matter. You have to face with that. And for instance, when it comes to the single class and multi-class systems, we're talking about money. Because in Europe, we have the multi-class system, so we can file a single application for a trademark and designate a lot of types of products and services. While in Latin America, you need to file as many applications as types of products which are contained in each class of the NIS international classification, which implies that you go one by one and pay one by one. And sometimes it may be accepted and sometimes not. And it is a lot of bureaucracy involved in there. Take that into account. Also, when it comes to online filing, we are very used to do that digitally. But when it comes to Latin America, not every country provides for this possibility. You need to go there physically. And if you are not domiciled in there, have your own, for instance, establishment there, you need to appoint a local IP lawyer to do that on your behalf. Otherwise, you won't be accepted. And one other thing that it's very remarkable when it comes to trademarks is that contrary to Europe, the intellectual property offices say, okay, I'm going to take into account every registration trademark, regardless of the opinion of the owner. Because in Europe, you can reach an agreement with the owner of a trademark which is very similar to yours. Reach an agreement and say, okay, so we're going to go exist peacefully. You're going to go for this kind of services, and I'm going to go for these ones. As far as there's no confusion, it's okay. But the European offices don't say a word about it. They accept it. While in Latin America, they want to check this coexistence agreement. And if there's a minimum risk of confusion because they are trying to defend in a very paternalistic way the interest of the consumer, it's going to be rejected. So another handicap. And when it comes to these registrations, as they are taking the whole range of registered trademarks, it involves a lot of time in analyzing the previous registered trademarks. So it is a lot of time in the proceedings. And again, as they are defending the consumer's interest, it doesn't matter what you think about it. You may not oppose to this new trademark, but they took into account and it's been rejected. Now, when it comes to design, we covered just the name. It is about appearance. We're talking about products themselves. So please, next slide, Leonardo, please. And as to just small comments about this, the registration requirements are quite similar, quite similar, small differences. But one very remarkable difference compared to Europe is that they don't have non-registered protection for designs. As you know, in Europe, we have the 3 years protection for identical designs, although you didn't register before the Intellectual Property Office. It doesn't happen the same in Latin America, except in 3 countries of Central America. As to the rest, if you don't register, you have no right. They also are not party to the Hague Agreement. So if you want to go with a single international application to many different countries at the same time, you cannot do that. You have to go Intellectual Property National Office by national office. And you can see the difference between the proceedings time. You can see the lapse between one place into another. And this is something to bear in mind when you are designing your IP protection strategy, because you may have imagined that it would take just a few months, and it may happen the case as in Chile when it comes to 2 years, and this is a lot. This is in the case, for instance, of the fashion industry, 2 or 4 seasons, and it may be out fashioned over. The same about duration protection that you can see Brazil and Mexico, it hasn't been updated, sorry, are 25 years top, while the rest, it depends, it is 5, 10, depends on the case. So you may be protected in one country of Latin America, and in the other one, it has been part of the public domain. And one issue that is very common when it comes to trade fairs and about trying to get money when you have created something, a new product, is that you are forced normally to register it, because otherwise this disclosure would jeopardize the novelty requirement, and your own disclosure would involve that you will be rejected because, oh, you already disclosed it, we already know that this is not new at all, sorry, next time. In this case, in Latin America, we have the so-called grace period, which is really great. You can disclose it anyway, your product in any Latin American country, and within this period, 12 months or 6 months, depending on the case, you can register it, because you may not be in the mood of doing that, or you are not sure about how is it going to be perceived by the consumers. And after that, you have this period of time to decide whether you register or not. And if you do so, you won't be rejected. They won't say, oh, but you already disclosed that, because you have this grace period. This is something similar that we can find in the patents, which is the next slide, because we also have the grace period for patents. It is 12 months for most of the countries in Latin America. And you may say, but we have something similar in Europe. I may say yes, but only in certain circumstances, only if this is in the case of abusement, or if it's within the frame of official exhibition, sorry, and you need to have some evidences of that, and it's quite limited. Whereas in Latin America, it's quite open, you can do that. What's the point about this? That if you do that in Latin America, then you are jeopardizing the novelty in Europe. So take care before doing any disclosure to be sure on where you protect first. And once you are at least submitted the application to the office, now you can start exhibiting your own things. About the registration proceedings, there you can see there's a huge backlog when it comes to certain countries, Argentina, Brazil. This is really an issue. And in Europe, they are doing their best. They are improving a lot, but it takes a lot. Whereas in Mexico and Peru or Colombia, times are quite acceptable and really close to Europe's standards. Argentina and Brazil, oof, not only the money, but the time. In 10 years for something related, for instance, to the ICT sectors, it's too much. It simply became out of the market because it is outrageous. But still, we have some proceedings to overcome this, because we have abbreviated proceedings. We can force it, for instance, when it comes to green patents, or thanks to the PPH. Something too technical, I won't go into this. As to the duration, 20 years, and you cannot extend it under very, very specific situations, for instance, in Peru, because it took too much, but that would be all. And this is exactly what I would like you to know regarding this core intellectual property rights, because I think it's time to go to the main the main tips for succeeding abroad when it comes to intellectual property rights. So, Patrice.
Thank you,
Yes,
César, for your presentation. Patrice, I will leave the floor to you. Just a quick reminder that we're running a bit late, but I'm sure we can wrap up the 10 tips and give a bit of time for the Q&A as well.
I will make it very short because these are tips, and I think everybody has understood that the issue needs to be taken carefully at. And César, you asked me a question at the very beginning of the seminar, and I didn't answer and address it immediately. I didn't snub your question, of course, but I want now to address it through these 10 basic IP tips. And as agreed, I will make the first 5 tips, and then you can follow up with the 4 last ones. So tip number 1, if you go to a foreign country, even if you want to enter into your own market, by the way, please conduct trademark and patent searches. Look at who is owning what rights in each country. This is key. You need to know where you put your feet. This is basic competitive intelligence. Don't invest in any country, especially in Asia, if you don't know who owns patents in your own technical domain or business domain. And you can, by monitoring and benchmarking who has already rights, you will know many things, from name of actors, potential partners, or future competitors, to free or protected inventions, because some of the information you will get will concern patents that are not protected anymore, and you may copy them if you want. So 1, search, monitor, benchmark. Look first at who is owning rights in your target market. 2, make your own audit. Check first, what are your intangible assets? What you have as assets? Where is your competitive edge? Where is your competitive advantage? What are your key brands? That's easy. What are your patentable products and processes? And file them before you enter that other market. What are your secret know-hows? Very important. Very few companies know how to identify and protect know-hows. And know where are your designs and copyrights. Try to identify who created, where the rights assigned has the confidentiality being preserved, are all NDAs, even the employment contract, complete to protect the assets of the company. This is key. This is point number 2. Point number 3, before you go to the foreign country, file first in your own country. There is an international system. The name is the Paris Convention, dating back to 1883, more than 100 years, that says that once you have rights in your country, you may extend these rights to other countries within 1 year for patents, or within 6 months for trademarks and for design patents. And so the first thing to do is to file in your own country, where you are more familiar, where it's not so expensive. And it's not only about filing patents and trademarks, it's also about registering copyrights, know-how, and designs, because the process is not the same, not exactly the same. And also, again, taking care of your contracts, your non-disclosure agreements, NDA, your contract with your subcontractors, with your partners, etc. 4, prepare a strategy. And in the strategy, I propose 3 steps. First, the competitive intelligence we've already mentioned as item 1, as tip 1, which is to monitor and see with whom you are working, with whom we are playing, your partners and your competitors, how you will be positioned there. Second is to manage your project and to use IP in direct relationship with your business plan. And three is how to valorize, how to give value to your company with IP, how to use IP to finance your developments or to increase your company value. If you want to sell your company, if you want to get credit from banks, or you want to have new shareholders and raise money, having IP is a key asset. Last, of course, I will plead for my profession. I am a certified European and French, but European patent and trademark attorney. And please rely on the expertise of a profession. Choose whoever you want. There are many possibilities and many actors in the market and many patent and trademark attorneys. Select one and get his or her expertise. Rely on his or her ethics and code of conduct. Rely on the confidentiality rules and the rules that there should be no conflict of interest, and rely on the liability of these professionals who, when they give you an advice, they are responsible for it. These were the first 5 tips. And César, what do you recommend as the 5 last tips?
Well, first of all, people have to take care about their first filing, because it is the gateway to international and national protection. What do we mean with this? From 2 perspectives. First, when you are about to register your trademark, just take a minute and really design it carefully. What exactly are you going to register? Regarding your trademark, please first think globally. What is exactly the name you're going to register as the trademark that is going to identify you, if you are lucky, abroad? Because if you do that and it is too distinctive, what do you get? Something that can be rejected or something that could be canceled too easily. And the same happens to patents. Just as you suggested very well, conduct prior searches so you can see whether this is available to be registered abroad, whether this is part of the state of the art, for to know whether this is really new or not. And the same about trademarks. You may think that it doesn't matter, you start in a low profile, you go first on your country, and you don't take into account what's happening around you. When you're trying to go abroad, then you find, the previous one, then you find that it was already registered. Or as it happens to the case of BlaBlaCar, it didn't happen to be a very BlaBlaCar brand named, because it happened to be Covoiturage. I'm not French speaker, but I think that it's pronounced that way. And it was too descriptive. It was founded back in 2006. And until 2013, they didn't realize that it may be not very linked to the kind of services that they were trying to cover. And on the other hand, that it was too descriptive, because there were many other companies that were copying them, and it wasn't really distinctive. Everyone could link it, but no one could pronounce it. They started from scratch and thought, how can we do this, an international trademark which is not descriptive? And the result was BlaBlaCar, because what do you do in a car? You speak. This is what you get. And the same happens about patents. If you conduct real good prior searches, you can be sure whether this is new or not. And then you got strong rights, because you are sure what you're registering. And when the competitors try to make it down, they can get it. But when it comes to after registration, which is the next slide, then we can see that you have to take care, because this allows you to build your own reputation upon a solid registration. You know that it is normally based on your first filing, and particularly regarding denominative trademarks, you based on that, because you can oppose your own trademark and they say, okay, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, and you can go forward. And if you do that right, you unlock a lot of gadgets. For instance, the priority right, which allows you to stop the time and have a 12 months period, so you can go in case of patents abroad and register them without jeopardizing your novelty. But it is based on your first filing, not on your first disclosure, which we mentioned before. And regarding the PCT, which is something kind of buying time gadget, you have 30 to 30 months period to think on whether you go national with a single application. This is an international application, and it's really cool because with a single application, you can designate a lot of countries and go through them with a single application. And you have time for this. 12 months first. After this 12 months, you got to think, okay, I go national. But until 31 months, you have time to think whether you are going national or whether you are finding the right partner or not. And very important, if you are taking care of your first file, don't forget to pay the fees. And you may say, this is stupid. How can someone happen to forget to pay the fees that support the main core of their business, which is their patent? Well, it happens. It happens a lot. In fact, it is foreseen an extra period for you to pay out of this time, and it is pretty normal. And in complication relationships, when it comes to business, for instance, the society or the partnership may be removed, and then who was in charge of paying this? Oh, I thought it was him. I thought it was you, or maybe you grow a lot, and who was appointed to do this? This thing happened. And about copyright, it is really important to register, or at least to be clear about the authorship of this, because then you can prove that you have the rights to exploit them properly. But this is what the sixth. About the seventh, recommendation, I would say, please monitor markets and competitors' behaviors, because this may be the chance for you to have new opportunities. If you are working on things related to mining data and so on, thanks to this kind of behaviors, then you can see that artificial intelligence was the new niche for you. But if you aren't paying attention and you are on your basement working as many of the inventors do, then you're wasting your chance to get new partnership, to identify the infringers that may be your partners in the future. And this is something that, for instance, in terms of interoperability, is a chance that you missed. But in general, and not only related to patents, this is a good way to identify infringements. And if you do that, it is really important because it takes us to the next point, which is the eighth one. You need to take care of your intellectual property rights, and you need to enforce them. And you cannot do that only because you register them. You need to go against any infringers and say, hey, you are doing the bad thing. And how can you do that if you're not paying attention? Well, it may be too hard for you because you're doing a lot of things on a daily basis. But this is what the worldwide surveillance systems are for. And this is better if you do that, if you outsource that and you let that on professional hands. They know how to do that. They can notify you every time someone infringes you, for instance, because they're trying to register a trademark very similar to yours, or because they are using a patent that is absolutely yours. But if you're trying to do it yourself at the speed that these new technologies are growing, it will be almost impossible for you to do that, and you are losing your chance to defend your rights. And it has to be really fast if you want to succeed. Which brings us to the ninth point, which is that you got to get familiar with local particularities. Because if you're trying to get abroad, you need to only not to eat the food you're going to have there, but to know how intellectual property rights work. We mentioned a lot of them during the previous mini module, and there you can see a lot of them that have not been mentioned too, like the currency fluctuation that is in Latin America occurs very often. And there are some things that has to be borne in mind when it comes to designing your intellectual property registration. And finally, if you are willing to go there and you have not been familiar with this intellectual property rights, it will be almost impossible for you to know whether you are complying the regulation regarding contracts. Because yes, you are hiding people, you have some providers, and you must be sure whether the contracts you are signing are observing the local law. Because for instance, you have to not take for granted when it comes to, for instance, patents or copyrights, that you are the owner because you invest a lot of money on that, or just because you appointed someone to do that on your behalf. Work for hire is very common, but if you do not include a clause in the contract saying that you will be the owner of the result, by default, options, depending on the country, may be that it may still be on the hands of the real author. And what does it happen? That you are operating without his authorization. He may come back to you and say, listen, you didn't pay me enough. You are infringing my rights, in fact. So pay attention to that. Seek professional intellectual property support. And of course, you have further questions. I think now this is the time.
Thank you very much, César and Patrice, for your insights on the IP protection abroad. Now, again, we can open the floor to questions. I have one myself. Could you please briefly address what is the most common mistake that European SMEs make in China, Southeast Asia, and Latin America?
Maybe I start, but I think we will have the same answer. If you don't have filed and apply for your own rights in your mother country, you will face huge difficulties in the target countries. Would it be in Asia? Would it be in America? So the major failure number one, is not to take care enough at protecting one's inventions, one's innovations, one's brands, one's softwares, one's copyright, one's know-how in the mother country, at home, and getting familiar with it. You always use your home rights then to protect your interests in foreign countries. Conventions, international conventions help you to do that. Of course, you need to file also abroad, but if you have not filed in your home country, you go to huge problems. So every step of a strategy is, of course, a risk, but the first step is really to file in your home country. What do you think, César? Do you agree with me, or would you see another major failure common to SMEs?
You're absolutely true. The most common misconception regarding SMEs is that once they register locally, meaning Europe, they are protected globally. So they don't pay attention to international protection. They don't take into account from the very beginning what steps should they take and the landscape of the destination countries that they would try to go. So exactly, as you mentioned, normally they don't pay attention. And one other thing that they mainly do is that they don't identify properly their intellectual property rights, and hence they don't protect them how they should. They think, for instance, they only have their brand name or one of their inventions, but they don't pay attention to the rest of them. And they go and operate without protection in these countries without noticing the risk they are facing.
Thank you both of you for the reply. If there are no further questions, we can end the webinar. I've added some details regarding our Twitter account, Facebook, LinkedIn, and our website or blog, where you can find more information on IP protection. Also, if you have any further question, please feel free to send me an email and we can follow up bilaterally with our experts. Again, I would like to thank you, César and Patrice, for your intervention. Also, Vasco and Mariana, for your great presentation on the three initiatives. And thanks, of course, to our participants of today's session. And we hope to see you again soon to our upcoming webinars. Thank you, all of you, and have a good day.
Thank you, Leonardo. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Goodbye.